Wentworth.
Okay. I move amendments 1 to 4 as circulated in my name. I've been advocating for tax reform since I was first elected, and I welcome the government's guts to bring a serious proposal forward. I share many of the ambitions the Treasurer has identified in his budget, but I cannot support the bill's proposals in their current form. And it's not because I don't support the intent. The government has correctly diagnosed significant problems in Australia's tax system, and it's not because I don't support the broad direction of measures. I believe we do need to rebalance the tax system to reduce our reliance on wages and to pay for that by reducing concessions on assets while alongside reducing spending as well. But I cannot support the bill in its current form for 3 reasons. 1, because not all of the revenue is being returned to the taxpayers. Some of it, $77 billion, has gone to the government, and I don't believe that's what the community wants. Secondly, because I think there are real issues that are unresolved with the CGT model the government has chosen. And thirdly, this bill has been rushed through in an unacceptable way. You cannot say that this is the most important tax reform in a generation and then rush it through as it has been. I have put amendments forward in relation to the CGT model because I think this is an area where there is an opportunity to get it right. I recognise that the government has I think, intellectually consistent approach, which is trying to make sure we only tax real gains, and that is what they're trying to do in this budget. I accept they've done that well. But I don't think that's actually the only or the main, necessarily, objective we should have in how we tax CGT. I think we also need to consider international competitiveness, incentives for risk-taking. That makes it easy for people to plan, and it's simple enough for them to understand, and it helps to create a fair society. Those are the other considerations. I think the government should, instead of the work that they're doing, move to a reduced flat discount to, say, 40 or 30%, 35%, rather than indexation approach, because I think that would narrow the gap between the taxation of labour and capital, produce a model comparable to other countries, raise similar amounts of revenue, not have issues with high-growth businesses or high-growth investments, and people would understand it. But regardless, given that the government has moved forward with the CGT model, I think there are 3 amendments which deal with 3 of the known challenges to the model the government has put forward. Firstly, I've moved an amendment to remove active businesses from the new indexation CGT regime and remain under a flat discount regime until such a time where the issues around start-ups and small businesses are resolved. I recognise the government is serious about trying to resolve some of these issues, but they should not, these changes should not be made until those issues are actually resolved. Secondly, a second amendment would allow regulation to deal with the issue of capital gains being taxed on a real basis and losses being taxed on a nominal basis. I recognise there are integrity issues around this, and I recognise the government's sincere in trying to deal with them. But honestly, this is a significant issue in this model of indexation of CGT, and I think if the government isn't willing to deal with these issues, it needs to recognise this model is not perfect either, and that other models should be considered. And finally, I think that we should, instead of using a flat 30% minimum real tax rate, instead the government should income average over the life of the asset or up to a maximum of 10 years. This is different to the Keating model because the Keating model, I think, did allow for game playing in terms of some of the issues that have been rightfully identified. It would ensure that people pay tax at their marginal rate of the time that they have held the asset on their CGT. I think that is not an unreasonable mechanism. It would deal with many of the issues I think the government's trying to deal with in relation to the 30% minimum real tax rate, but would do it in a way that people would find, I think, easy to understand and I think simpler to do. So those are the 3 changes I think I have put forward in terms of this bill. I recognise I don't think these amendments are perfect, but I also don't think the bill's perfect. The government is not giving this bill enough scrutiny in the Senate, and it is not giving enough, I think, consideration of real issues with the bill and trying to make it better. And I stand on the basis that I want this bill to be better. I want the government to make really substantial tax changes that make a real difference to the country over a long period of time. But at this stage, I think there are issues with what the government has done, and they need to be resolved, and they should be resolved in the House before we're obliged to pass the legislation.
The question is the amendments.